All right. Okay, because I'm Jewish, I need to talk with my hands. So, but I'm not the speaker. So I'm just going to introduce them. We all agree that we want to have a God who's bigger than my head. So you could be the biggest intellectual, have the biggest brain, but you don't want a God that fits in your brain. We all want a God that's bigger than our brain. So from time to time, things are going to happen that we can't understand. But it's not because there's an issue with God. It's because God is bigger than our brain. So things are going to happen that we don't understand. The destruction of the first temple, second temple, being in exile, being in Galus for so many years, very close to 2,000 years, is not something that we can understand. You're going to turn around and say the Jews sinned and therefore they got sent to exile. I'm not sure what's the biggest sin we could do that we end up with so much trouble, so much sorrow, being in exile for so long. It's not all that long ago that the Nazis decimated and destroyed world Jewry, but focusing on European Jews. 6 million Jews got killed and tortured and murdered, and very few people went through this and came out in one piece at the other end. It's something we can't understand, and I'm not going to try and explain it because it's from a God who's bigger than our brain. But it's from Hashem, and it's something that we can connect. So when God gave us the Torah, God said, I am the God who took you out of Egypt. So the rabbis asked, why don't it say you're the God who took us out of, pray to the heaven and the earth? It's a bigger deal. And one of the answers given is because taking us out of Egypt is something a little bit closer to home that we can relate to and understand and appreciate. So the destruction of the temple was nearly 2,000 years ago. The Holocaust was only about 70 odd years ago. And we're very lucky to have one of the survivors who went through the concentration camp and has come out and is still standing strong and smiling, Rabbi Ivor Pearl. And if you don't mind to say a few words, maybe explain a little bit as a boy in Cheder and Bells.
That's it?
That's it.
Lovely to be here. I mean, lovely is not the right expression, but anyway, I'm proud to be here to tell you about my story. Now, normally I go to give my talk to school children and adults, but I feel that talking to a community like here, I think I'll be wasting my time telling my story. What I would like to do, with your help, please, I'll say a few words about my life and answer questions rather than telling you what you want to hear, rather than think what I should think you want to hear or what do you know. Anyway, first of all, thank you, Rabbi, for asking me to come here. And I don't know what you know about the Holocaust. Can you tell me who knows anything about the Holocaust? What? Such as? Now, if I was to ask you, when did the Holocaust start?
38.
Yeah, anybody else?
33.
33.
And then
34.
Well, I'm afraid you're all out by 1,000 years. The Holocaust started over 1,000 years ago with anti-Semitism. But all the Holocaust did is somebody called Hitler came along and pressed a button and he says, right, here you are, you can do what you want to do about the anti-Semitism. But the actual Holocaust itself, I mean, the culmination was in 1932 onwards, in Germany. Anyway, as I said, what I'll do, I'll give a small description about my life and fill you in together afterwards with questions. I come from a family of 11. Rebels Hasidim. 11. Mother, father, 5 brothers, 4 sisters, of which only my brother, who unfortunately has since then survived the Holocaust. And then when we finished the liberation, I was interviewed by a television program. and said, can you tell me about your life story? And they said the same thing. I come from a family of 11, mother and father, 5 brothers, 4 sisters, and went to the camps, and 2 of us survived, and then they carried on. And they said, no, wait a minute, you've told me about 11 people. Who were they? What colour hair did they have? And that's when I realized myself that I myself have also become dehumanized, just mentioning figures, not realizing that I'm talking about children, brothers, sisters, mother and father. And in fact, I celebrated my 90th birthday about 4 weeks ago. No, but how did I come over here? I mean, to this part of London, because I lived in the other side of London. Have you heard of Buckhurst Hill?
Yes.
You have?
Yes.
Amazing.
There's
Rob Brandon.
friends
Now he's responsible for me buying 10 heads. If I can just interject, I'll tell you why, because when I moved to Buckhurst Hill, I was a member of a shul community, and I read in the Jewish Chronicle that the Chabad is coming to Buckhurst Hill. And I said, well, look, I've got to go along and support them because there are no Yid in Buckhurst Hill. If he's going to get a minyan, anyway, eventually I found out who he was, and I saw him. And I said to him, I said, you know, Rabbi, let the Chabad go where the television program goes, and nobody else go there, Chabad goes there. But I think here, you made a big mistake. He said, you're lucky if you last a year. If anything, if you lasted 1 year over here, I'll eat my head up. 10 years, move them up for 10 years, they make an appeal. They said, Ivor, you come to get, you have to give a talk to appeal. Could you tell them? And I said to him, you know, Rabbi Tucker, because of you, I had to eat 10 heads now, because it's not only he survived 10 years, but he's thriving and doing very well indeed. It's about you. Anyway, I lost my train of thought. Why did I say this?
Your boy growing up in Belgium?
Oh yeah, a boy growing up in Hungary, coming from Belzer Hasidim, until about 16 or 17, I was a nice yeshiva boy. Until I met my dear wife, and she showed me the lights. But my life was getting up in the morning. I'm talking about in Hungary in 1940s, when in the summer was very, very hot like it is now, but in winter it used to be very, very cold as well. Get up 5 o'clock in the morning, go to Cheder till about 8 o'clock, have a little breakfast, and then do set your studies afterwards till about 1 o'clock, go home for lunch, and 2 o'clock bed again for Cheder till about 6 or 7 o'clock. That used to be the normal thing. Now the funny thing is that as well, that because we were Hasidim, we spoke in Yiddish, which we learned in Yiddish, but also the custom was used to speak in Yiddish to mother, to brother, my father and brothers, and Hungarian to mother and sisters. I don't know why. I don't know if it's for any reason. But anyway, so the normal thing was getting up in the morning, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, go to Cheder, come back and go to studying. Now, moving forward now, anti-Semitism was quite normal in Hungary. In fact, if you go back to the history of Hungary, there were about 600,000 or 700,000 Jews in Hungary. But anti-Semitism was there all the time, but we lived with it. We knew we were Jews, they were Goyim, we had to just get on with life. Until, of course, in Germany, Hungary was an Axis power in Germany. Do you know the history about it?
Yes.
That Hungary fought with the Germans.
That was that?
Hungary fought with the Germans.
Hungarian Empire.
That's right.
Yeah.
While the Hungarians fought with the Germans, the leader of Hungary said, well, all right, we can leave the Jews alone. But then they could see that they were losing the war. They wanted to make peace overtures with the Americans. And as soon as they found out about that, they occupied Hungary, and literally within 4 weeks, our life has completely and utterly changed forever. In fact, there was the population, the Hungarian peasants, used to demonstrate outside the town hall, saying, why don't you bring our loved ones home? Because they were absolutely massacred in the east, on the Eastern Front, with the Russians. And they said, you know what, we haven't got the infrastructure. We can't get the infrastructure to bring your loved one back home. Within 4 weeks after occupying Hungary, how did they find the infrastructure to take over 500,000 people to their death? And you think to myself, as a youngster, I said, how can anybody hate somebody more than love someone? But anyway, as I said, I'll fill you in all the details later on. But we ended up in Auschwitz, and out of all the family, it's only me and my brother survived.
How old were you?
It's a very good question. How old are you, young man? How old are you?
I'm 13.
13. When I was 12, you remind me so much of a young boy when I was. I was 12 years and 2 months when I entered Auschwitz. I went to Auschwitz. And surprisingly enough, I'm alive today for 2 reasons. First, because I spoke Yiddish, and then because I was slightly overweight for my size. So, you know, when people say obesity, I say that because I was slightly overweight, I'm alive. And the other thing as well, because when the cattle truck arrived at Auschwitz after about 4 days of traveling, which I can tell you later on about that as well, you could see through the crack of the cattle trucks, people working in striped uniforms. They were Polish Jews working on the railway line, kept on shouting in Yiddish, you must eat all the food, don't save any food. And children, if asked how old you are, you must say that you're at least 16 years old. Well, later I found out why. Anyway, so we stumbled out from the cattle truck and we arrived there and we started marching, women and children one side and boys and young men on the other side. And he came in front of a man in SS uniform with white gloves on, who said they were Dr. Mengele, but I don't know, it doesn't matter who he was. And suddenly stops me. Now, because I could understand Yiddish, he said, "Wie alt bist du?" So 16. For a millisecond, I could see his line every night of my life. He said, "Oh, I'll go to the right," thinking to himself, "You're telling me a lie, you won't survive anyway." But if I wasn't able to speak Yiddish, knowing what the German asked me, he would ask me, "How old are you?" I said I was 12. Now, the system was that they said 16, they didn't know how to come to the quickly. You had to decide quickly. There are hundreds of thousands of people. He said, anybody under 16 will not allowed to live. So by saying, because I could speak Yiddish, I realized what he said. I said 16, that's one of the reasons I'm alive. But a few other things happened during my journey through the camps as well, which I can tell you about later, otherwise. Anyway, so they camped in Auschwitz for quite a few months, and eventually the Russians were coming towards that was in 1944 already. So they had to evacuate Auschwitz quickly, but shipped back over to Germany, which is another quite a big story about that as well. And we were in Germany for another few months, and then the Americans were coming, and apparently they were giving orders that all the prisoners should be killed. But things happened again, and I could fill in a story if you're interested as well, how we survived. And eventually we ended up in Dachau itself, and we couldn't even there were so many people there, we had to bivouac in the parade ground. And we were there, I think, about 2 nights, and some shells started falling, and the shell hit the wire of the camp, and people were rushing through. And that's how we realized Americans were coming, and we were saved. Of course, the rest is our history, how we survived, and how we came to England, and where we're here. Anyway, that's a shortness of my story.
Did you go to Auschwitz with family members?
My family members, my father, it's also a big story to that. My father, and my eldest brother, we were taken to the Munkatar Labor Battalion. Anybody who was 16 had to not join, but of course in the forced labor, to accompany the army and do all the dirty work. And eventually we found that after about a few months we met our father and mother in Auschwitz itself. How, when, or why, I'm not quite sure. No, anyway, so as I said, I will fill out the question. It's too much to tell. So just keep on asking me and I said, well, I can tell you.
What job did you get in Auschwitz?
Well, Auschwitz was an extermination camp. There was a few labor also, but not much work done. It was mainly extermination camps, sorting out the people that were able to work and kill and get rid of those who were not able to work. And eventually used to get, every now and then, request for so much labour to go somewhere else, to Germany, somewhere else. But in Auschwitz itself, while we were there, most of us didn't do any work at all. We just waited to be dead, to be created, to be shipped over to somewhere else.
I thought Auschwitz was a whole labour complex.
Pardon?
I thought Auschwitz was a whole complex of labour camps. Forced labour, not just extermination. Auschwitz.
I'm not quite sure the question.
I thought Auschwitz was a complex of forced labour, not just extermination.
No. Obviously, Auschwitz did have, but very, very little, very few people for actual workers itself. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, you know, I don't know who said that, which leader said that. I think it was Napoleon who mentioned it, or
Sobibor was an extermination.
You know, we went eventually, I had to go to Germany for a number of reasons. And as we're driving around through Poland, every few kilometers, the guide who was with us said there was another labour camp. The place was a killing field all over. Poland, yes. I mean, why did it pick Poland? Why did Germany pick Poland? Why did Germany pick Poland as to be Auschwitz? Obvious, the most Jews were in Poland, and the most
Jews were there before the war.
Before the war, exactly. The millions, and also they had the most. To be honestly, they had the most support from people there as well. The least resistance from Poland. Not only from Poland itself, every country. They had no problem whatsoever. In fact, when I go around telling people, children my story, I ask them, how many are survivors? Jewish schools, of course, not non-Jews. And about 10 or 12 of them put their hands up. And I said to them, you know what, all of you could have put their hand up, because if Germany would not have taken the left turn to attack Russia, they'd come to England. And they had all the people they wanted to contact with the help them with the extermination of the Jews. There's no shortage of any country they occupied or whatever they went to.
So what year was it that you went to Auschwitz, and when did you start when?
Well,
And when were you liberated?
we were in Auschwitz in 1944, as I mentioned, because Hungary won.
Right at the end, you went, 1944.
No, they were the middle of 44, about May 44. I went up in Auschwitz, and then, of course, sorry, was it a question?
When were you liberated?
We were liberated in April 45 by the Americans.
And then what happened then?
And
And then what happened to you after that?
After that, I think not only the Jewish people, but the world itself could see what happened. When the gates of hell opened up, they never realized what was going on in the world. But we were looked after very, very well by the Jewish organization. But they made one condition: the Zionist movement was very, very strong. And they said that they don't care where people go back anywhere else, but any children that have got no parents will only go to one place, it's Palestine. They were not allowed to go anywhere else at all. But of course what happened? Palestine was under British mandate. So you couldn't go there. So where are you supposed to go? Well, so surprisingly enough, as I was one of the younger ones, the youngest child of survivors, they said we can go to the Rebbe, the Rosenberger Rebbe, who was a very famous rabbi who survived as well. And pardon? Rosenberger Rebbe.
He ended up in the Tanya.
That's right. That's right. They had to ask, because who did you go to? We didn't have any parents. And in fact, at one stage, only my brother and I survived, and we said, well, why don't you go back to Hungary to find if any of your family survived? So we said, all right, we start going. I was 13 years old, I wasn't arrested yet, we just turned 13. And on a lovely sunny day, so we said, all right, we'll start walking. He said, well, where is Hungary from Dachau? Young boys of 12 that didn't have any schooling whatsoever. We said, all right, we'll ask. We start marching. We marched for about an hour in beautiful Bavarian countryside, and there were a few people walking back towards the camp. And he said, where are you two boys going? He said, well, we're brothers. We want to go back to Hungary. We want to see if any family survived. He said, don't go there, you don't know where it is. Do you know Hungary? Where's Hungary? So we'll ask people to find out where. I don't know, come back to the camp. There's a United Nations organization there. Go in there and ask them if I'm sure they'll have information about family that you want. He said, all right, so we went back to the camp. We went back to the United Nations, to UNRWA, United Nations Refugee Organization. And we said, look, we'd like to find out about the family. Took the details, as they come back in 2 days' time. We went back to two days later, and they said, look, I'm sorry to tell you, we've got proof of some of your family did not survive, but we've got no information whatsoever of anybody else. So we thought to ourselves, well, what's the point of going back to Hungary? We don't want to see that land again. So no, I want to go to Palestine. But of course, the Palestine Zionists said they were not allowed anywhere else but to go to Palestine. But the British said you can't go there. So surreptitiously, the committee, they had to get together about 100 children, and in the middle of the night, take us out from the camp itself to come over to England.
Can you describe the day you fell into the bar mitzvah at the concentration camp?
I was born in February 1932. Now we didn't quite know, in the camp we had no idea the dates and what, but we knew roughly what day it was. And I thought to myself, I started learning my bar mitzvah part for the Brat Gemara, for my dissertation of the bar mitzvah. And I went over to the wire, next to the wire. I couldn't go further because obviously the guards were there as well. And I prayed to God, so please God, let me get out of this hell while I was alive, without any clothes on. I will not ask anything at all anymore. Of course, the Rebbeinu Shalom answered my question, but needless to say, I still ask for help from Rebbeinu Shalom now and then.
This was in Auschwitz?
That's what in Auschwitz. Because I knew that was my bar mitzvah part. That's what the time I should have gone to do outside my black water, which I learned.
Yeah. Ivor, I'm a quick question.
Hello.
How does growing up sort of in the height in the 1930s in Hungary compare to living in Golders Green now and seeing what you see now?
Well, I'll tell you something, that things are happening here which I never had in Hungary. I can't believe that with all the security that there are in the shores, there's one thing we never had to worry about, going to the shore. You were killed. You were killed until you got there, but once you went to the shore, you weren't bothered. And so I said, what's happening here? With all the security everywhere. So it brings back memories, sad memories as
If you go
well.
to Frankfurt, they have policemen with machine guns outside.
That's right.
And Singapore as well.
Well, in fact, it's bringing back also to the story. I was asked to go to Germany to be a witness for one of the Nazi officer who was standing trial for the Hungarian jury. And we were staying in a hotel. The coach turned up, and there were two German policemen with machine guns there. Guess what I thought? But then I realized they were there to save me rather than to kill me. So what a difference it was.
What year was that? What year was
That was about 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh.
Oscar Groening, have you heard of Oscar Groening? He was very,
What happened at the trial? What happened at the trial of that of Nazi officer?
well, that's a very good question. That it felt very, very strange. First of all, they're all Germans, and Germans, they're there to protect me.
Yeah.
Because of the demonstration against it by the right wing there, against the trial. And I thought, what a turnaround it is. And surprisingly enough, I don't say I felt safer, but I think yes, I felt safer when I was in Germany after the war than I went back to Hungary. In Hungary, I didn't feel as well, I mean, safer is a bit of a strong expression, but I felt more at ease in Germany than in Hungary.
I have two questions, if you don't mind.
Uh,
Okay. One, that Have you been to other camps except Auschwitz? Because I know that a lot of people were transported to Auschwitz from other camps or from Auschwitz to other camps.
Yes. So I mean, why only Auschwitz?
Yeah, so
You know that you're asking a very, very good question, because you know when they say Yiska, in the shul, they mentioned names, they mentioned Auschwitz, this, that, and then people said, well, what about all the other camps? There were dozens of camps. But they said they can't mention every camp itself. The point that you're making Auschwitz, because that's what brings back people's memory, people's mind.
no, but I'm asking you yourself, have you been to other camps?
Yes, of course.
Before?
I was,
No, as a prisoner.
yes,
You've
I was in Auschwitz,
in Dachau.
in Dachau.
Oh, it's-
Before Dachau Kafri, before Kafri Allah, before our further thing.
Oh,
I mean, I went to quite a few holiday camps.
yeah. Now, the other question that I wanted to ask, what was your day like in,
Do you know-
in the camp where you say that there were not actually work?
No, in Auschwitz there was not work.
Yeah, so what was the day like?
Nothing.
What was the routine?
The routine was to get up in the morning, appel, roll call, every morning about like daylight, could have been, depends what time of the year. And most of the time you just had to sort of waste your life, nothing at all, you waited. And usually didn't take all that long before asked that you were tattooed and did small unimportant work until shipped out to other parts of Europe. But Auschwitz itself, there's very few people worked.
And the third question, if you don't mind, did you keep in touch with other survivors? Have you met them after the war?
You mean after the war?
Yeah.
Well,
after the liberation.
Yes, but after the war, I had a different philosophy. I went to a bit of yeshiva, a bit of college, got a learning theology, what's the name, college, technical college. But I wanted to forget all about that for about 40 years. But even now, I'm not so sure if I did the right thing or not. But for 40 years, I thought to myself, the best way forward for me, forget about the past and try to get to the onward life. But of course, eventually, events catches up with you, and you had to feel as though you had to do your duty and go around talking about things as well. But for about 20 or 30 years, you're quite right, I wanted nothing to do with Auschwitz, with any survivors.
And you didn't also talk about it
No.
during those times?
No. In fact, when I was first asked to talk about it, I was on the board of management of my shul. There was VE Day, you know what VE Day? Compared to VJ Day, Victory in Europe, Victory in Japan. That VE Day, we had a committee in the shul, and I was on the committee, and they said we asked all the certain people to come along to commemorate, not the celebration, commemorate. And they said, Ivor will ask the teachers, the doctors, when they come along, and said, Ivor, you're the one who'll have to represent the Holocaust because you're the only one on the committee. I said, I might be the only one on the committee as a survivor, but I haven't spoken to anyone about it. And I don't know when. He said, well, we can understand you don't want to talk about it, but you have to find someone who can represent the Holocaust. And the person I eventually found went to Israel to commemorate the Holocaust. So they said, Ivor, you'll have to do it. So I couldn't run away. I had to speak. Anyway, after there was on the Shabbos, after there was a Kiddush, and after the Kiddush, when on the way home, people came over to me and they said, Ivor, you know about it, Holocaust, you've read about it, but to actually meet someone there means so much more to us. And I thought to myself, Ivor, you can't run anymore. And from that day onwards, schools started contacting me and other people as well. And eventually, I'm bragging a bit, I ended up getting the PEM from the Queen for Holocaust education. But for 50 years, I had nothing. I thought the best way forward is completely forget about it.
Lady, that had a question? You had a question? Okay, first.
Did your faith
to God become stronger?
That's my question.
Because
when I give talks to non-Jewish students, to youngsters, the question comes up. And I say to them, look at the price I paid to be a Jew. I mean, I paid for nothing. How can you expect me to break my faith? But the only thing is that more and more I started talking, and I'm ashamed to say that in front of the Rebbe, I said to him, you know what? I can't tell you that because I'll ask until I put the lid on me. I'll come in front of the one that and ask him, can you tell me what happened down below? What happened? Because he can't find it. But as far as faith is concerned, it's an obligation more than a belief. I'm sorry to say that.
thank you.
You mentioned before that in Auschwitz, it was the Bar Mitzvah date. He went to the France and went to the Black Gedora. He also mentioned he came from Hasidic Shul and where she was. So a lot of people like that, stories I see in the books, always say, oh, where was God? And God betrayed us, yeah? And a lot of people lost their faith, as you just asked about faith. Now, where did you get the koyach, the strength, for such a woman as a boy of 13, facing death any minute all over,
But
thinking about your bar mitzvah, about your pshetl, about your kabbalah in that hollow camp? How did you get the strength? And I see it till now, you're from Guy. How did
I can tell you two stories because when we were taken from Auschwitz into Germany, they're marching along there, and there was a ditch on there, and there was a siddur in the ditch. And anybody all started rushing to the city to pick up the siddur. Of course, somebody else got there, but of course the German dog got there before us. So I'm trying to say is, even there, the munah was still very strong.
Wow.
And a week after we arrived in Auschwitz, young children go around, say, come on, let's go and see someone. What? There were 3 yeshiva of us fasting to death because they didn't want to eat any treif. So us, as young boys, go and take him in. But the story, what I say about the Holocaust is sanitized. You know what I mean sanitized? Not the full story, because the full story is unbearable to talk about. In fact, when I gave talk to youngsters, after the talk, a mother came over to me and she had quite a discussion, not a discussion, she told me off. He said, why were you so descriptive? I said, what are you talking about? He said, my daughter is 16 years old, she's crying her eyes out because of what you said. I said, I don't want to say anything, young lady, but she said, I was 12 years old when I went it. Not 16.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying, what I'm saying is, even now what I'm talking about, you haven't got the fucking idea what I'm talking about. Shall I tell you what, the bunks, the 3 beds of bunks, everybody wants to go to the top. Why?
You didn't get the screenshot from the bottom.
The what?
The screenshot that came down.
That's right.
The screenshot.
Say it in English.
The shoot.
That's
The
right.
urine. You used to pull down.
The urine and everything, because all you had was there was about 800-900 people in a block, locked in overnight. There were 2 buckets, 1 bucket of water and an empty bucket on either side, and that's it. One for the pollution and one was for the no, I mean, can you imagine that? And this goes along, all along the line. You just, you cannot, and I start talking to people in Germany, including here as well, you cannot imagine the cruelty.
Guilt. Did you feel guilt that you survived and others didn't? Why?
I've read about it. No, not guilt. I wouldn't say guilt, but I wanted to. I was very, very close to my eldest brother, who was 24 years old. He had semicha at 24 years old. I always looked up to him, and he also came to Auschwitz with me. Why didn't he not survive? Why did my brother not survive? Why did I survive? Not guilt, but questions. But to answer the question even more so, there were 2 professors discussing about why did people survive. And they came to the conclusion nobody Nobody survived without luck. It doesn't matter who you are, what you were. But he said, not everybody who had luck survived. Now what is an extra thing that they can't tell? They don't know what. Because I keep asking myself, I was 12 years old. What did I know? Or I was more Yiddishkeit than the secular education. How did I survive?
Did you meet up with your brother at all? Did you help him? Did he
Very
help
good
you?
question, very good question. My brother, who survived with me, saved me from the jaws of death 3 times, literally from the oven, from the gas chamber, 3 times. And I met my father, all of a sudden we announced he's walking along, and my brother said to me, Opako is here, my father is here, because he went to the Labour Battalion. We had no idea, obviously we couldn't ask, and I don't know if he could tell us how, when, or why, but he was taken to the Labour Battalion before we left Auschwitz, and then all of a sudden he turned up over there.
So how did your brother save you 3 times?
As I mentioned before, it didn't work over there. But they asked people, the people who wanted to prepare to work on Sundays, not because of the work, because of the, I suppose, the guards, they couldn't get enough guards. And people who volunteered to go on Sundays to work, when you come back into the camp, you went out to the field, outside the camp, with guards. When you came back in the field, you came back past the SS kitchen. And as a payment for working on a Sunday, you were allowed to lick out the cauldrons for the soup. Of course, everybody started to go there. I also went, 12 years old. And I came back and started going to lick the cauldron, the air inside and goes. And the rule was, and now there you had rules. You did not obey the rules, literally, you did not exist. The only way to survive, just look straight ahead, don't look at anyone else, and do as you were told. And as you came back, you had to disappear for the first barrack, the first block, to open there because the air inside and that, you don't know what. And I ended up in a block full of children. And the door was locked. And when the air inside all went clear, the door wouldn't open. My brother heard where I was, kept on telling me, come on, Ivor. I said, no, I'm scared, they'll kill me, they hurt me, and it doesn't matter. But eventually, what happened was, all the children were checked whether they were able to work or not before they opened up the block. And there was such a commotion, and it couldn't have any some sort of ordinance, it just locked up the whole block altogether. And my brother managed, I don't know how, I don't know why, he took me out. And that night, there was, all you could hear was lorries. Because after, of course, once you went to the block, nothing you could do. All you could hear is lorries and screaming. And the following morning, as you went out, the whole block of children were taken to the gas chamber. If he wouldn't have been there, say, to pull me out from there, I wouldn't have been there. And a couple of other times as well.
What was the second time?
The second time I had typhus. Does anyone know about the doctor here? Typhus is a disease from unhygiene. And there was a block, a hospital block. I know what it was, you went in there, and if you did not improve after 2 days, you were taken to the gas chamber. And I went in that block as well because I was delirious and fever and whatnot. And my brother came over and he took me out from there. And if I would have been there for more than 2 days, I would have been alive.
How did you know that you were hurt?
Well, we knew I had to go there because I was terribly ill.
Yep. You were together with him all the time?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And the hospital was in the middle of the camp. You didn't go to a nice hospital with hygiene.
The third time?
There's a number of occasions. Anyway, too many of them. That's two or three occasions I remember. And the third time was when we were working in underground they were taken outside near the depot. We were working underground, and there was a building, I think, some sort of concrete block. And I was too young to do that, so somebody said to me, "Go on, you go in there, shelter there while you were working." Of course, once you found that you were being sheltered, you didn't do your work, of course, there's no such thing as punishment. That's it, that was the end. He managed to save me. There must have been a number of other occasions as well.
Sorry, I've answered this already. Did you blame man or God? Do you think it's man's free will? Because when people say it's God, I think it's not for me to say, it's only for you to say.
Do you know,
I'm using their free will.
I'm asking that question quite a lot of the times, and I'm trying to say to them, I don't want to talk about politics or about religion, but I wonder if I'd still have that faith, if I would have come from a religious family. I mean, my faith at the moment is quite strong. It has to be. But would I have that faith, or would I have had a religious background? I don't know. But if I'd answered the question, did it answer the question?
Did you ever meet the Belzer Rebbe?
Yes.
He gave you a special bracha?
Yeah, no, there is another story as well. My father was sure I was ill, and you know, it was about 1943 in Hungary. Where did you go for some sort of help? You couldn't go to the doctor. So he was at the Belzer Rebbe was in Budapest. He said he went there for a bracha, for a blessing. And I found out that he did go, my father's going, so I wanted to go as well. Of course, there must have been a real loss. Because my mother said, "Darling, you can't go because the anti-Semitism, and it's not like going on a journey here." I said, "No, I want to go anyway." So I went along with my father, with Shalom, and to the Belzer Rebbe. And I think we waited there for about 8 hours before we got in to see him. And he asked me, "How old am I?" I said, "I'm 12. You bar mitzvah? Not yet." He took out the handkerchief, because apparently he didn't check anyone's hand unless he was 13, the mitzvah. But the only thing I can say to you, if he gave me a bracha, what about my father? Didn't he give a bracha to my father? It's a difficult question.
Lisa, Lisa.
So.
Yeah, I just want to know, after the war, which countries were you living in?
Well, as I mentioned before, after the war, my brother wanted to go to one place, Hungary, which we couldn't, or he didn't want to go back. Then he wanted to go to Palestine. But of course, Palestine was under British mandate, and they wouldn't allow anyone there. So we didn't know what to do. That's what I said before. So we asked him, Klausenberg Rebbe, where shall we go? And he said, look, as far as he's concerned, the biggest mitzvah you should do, youngsters, leave Germany anywhere, anyhow you can. And being the youngest survivors, we had the first opportunity to choose which country. And the first transport that left from Germany came to England. So that's how, which I think I'm rather thankful that I did, yes. Yes.
So Jans, 2 questions, and thank you so much for coming to speak to us here. So the question I think that I was trying to ask is, why people sometimes say, why did God do this? And she's saying, man did it, not God. But my question is, why did God stop it? And the other thing is, I sing sometimes of these into the Holocaust survivors, and I try to sing like jazz numbers and Sinatra and Rose Day and happy songs, and I try not to touch on these issues of faith or anything too serious. And would you prefer that people sort of avoid the subject, or would you prefer to talk about it?
Well, I think the first question should be addressed to the Rebbe, not to me.
I touched on that in my introduction.
Well, it's all I can tell you is that in the school, there are these questions always arises. I said to them, you can say God, but of course, you couldn't have done without people. As I mentioned before, there was no shortage whatsoever in any country, no shortage of volunteers to take part in the killing. So whether I don't know, I think it's a dangerous question, especially someone sitting next to me.
I
I've read some books that from very learned people that the Jews it happened to the Jews, the Holocaust, because they had lost their faith in God, they become assimilated, and therefore they deserved it in inverted commas. I've read this from very learned Jewish authors. And my blood boils. What's your thoughts on that?
You know, I come from very, very Jewish family. So also, you know, everything predetermined is done because of God's doing. But like I started before in my talk, it's a religion, God and politics I'd rather not talk about. Not don't talk about it, I mean, you can't answer. All I can tell you is I'll have an answer if and when the time comes for me to go.
I'd like to add my 2p worth. Right? Stuff from me is from the Rebbe. Any person, however learned he projects himself to be, who gives a reason for the Holocaust, he's justifying the Holocaust. It was okay because of X, Y, and Z. Okay? So in my introduction, I said as follows. We have a God who's larger than my brain. So therefore, not everything I can understand. The Holocaust happened. It was something very bad, very terrible. You can't... If anyone's going to research and read the books and watch any of the films of what happened, speaks to any of the survivors what happened, and they don't filter them out. They tell you the nitty-gritty, what they went through. It's not a normal thing that happened. It's something very bad that happened. At the end of the day, Hashem rules the world. Hashem controls the world. So Hashem is the only one who's answerable for the Holocaust. Every single individual had the freedom to choose whether he wanted to be part of it. Every German, every Romanian, every Hungarian, every Polish person, every person who was involved, and the United States and the British, and then their involvement as well. All, as an individual, have to answer for themselves. But the bigger picture, why did the Holocaust happen? If anyone has the chutzpah to get up and say it happened for X, Y, and Z, they're justifying the Holocaust. They're justifying why his father got killed, why his brother got killed, why his mother got killed, why everyone got killed. We can't, it's not for us to justify. God has to justify himself. And Ivor says, he's not in a rush, but when he gets in front of the Almighty, God's going to have to spell out why he did and why he did it. But no person can come along and say that if this happened because of X, Y, and Z. Any tragedy that happens to a person, oh, this person deserved it because of this. Absolutely not. It's not for you. It's not random why things happen. God is orchestrating the world, and he's been doing so since the beginning of time. And he knows what he's doing. All right? He's got a good track record. If he does something that doesn't fit into my brain, the problem with my brain's limited, but God's not limited. So God has to answer for the Holocaust. God has to explain why he did it. But not one person can come along and say, oh, it's because of this, that, and the other. Otherwise, you're just justifying it. Yeah, the Holocaust was a good thing. All right? So I hope that answers your question. And any person, we are rabbi the big beard down to the floor. He cannot come and say Holocaust happened because of X, Y, and Z. It's wrong. Absolutely wrong.
But the only thing I can add to the Rebbe's answer, I'm asked that question. You know, the Richard Walker, the professor of that, he made a very good point that every time Jews suffered, other people suffered as well. What about what's happening in China now? What about the Japanese did in China? I mean, if you're taking a that course, you know, I think just they happen to be Jews because they're always there.
I mean, I'm just amazed, you know. I mean, I'm reading one book by some modern Orthodox University economist, clinical psychologist, a professor, a woman, and she writes this rubbish.
Well, the only answer I'm very
impeccable, and I'm thinking, how can you write this rubbish?
No, the only thing I can say, Rabbi, I don't like to say that the majority of the Jews, a good portion of the Jews died because they were religious Jews.
Did you ever live in
So the saying that they got punished us for not doing a thing is a bit hard to take.
I'm telling you, the Rebbe says it's absolutely wrong to say any person died in the Holocaust, killed and murdered, slaughtered in the Holocaust because of X, Y, and Z. Right? It doesn't work like that.
Can I ask a question? It's a bit of a change of topic from a very heavy topic we've been pursuing.
Right.
My son just turned bar mitzvah. Thank you, everyone. And he told me in the car on the way here that his teacher told him that if we ever meet a Holocaust survivor who's been through the Holocaust and has still maintained his faith and keeps any part of Torah mitzvahs, it's a very special privilege. And that if we could get a bracha from that person, it's a very, very special thing. So I wanted to ask you if there's any chance you could give my son a bracha that
Well,
he
give you-
has
well,
that you know.
Give everyone a bracha.
I was going to say, no, I've heard this saying, but all I can tell you is when I am asked a question, I feel awful. I feel as though I need blessing. But I take the point. Before I go up, I'll give a blessing.
Good. Yeah.
What state did you come from? What state? From where do you come from?
Hungary.
I know, but from where? I know not
Yeah, I come from Hungary, a place called Moko. In Hungary, it was called a Little Jerusalem. But you know why? There were not many. There were only about 2,000 or 3,000 Jews, but the very, most of them are all strict Orthodox Jews. But the place was Moko, a place called Moko. M-A-K-O. It's not too far from...
Yeah, no, I'm asking because my grandfather was also from Hungary. He was also
Where from?
Poch.
Pech. But can you tell him?
Poch or whatever the accent I can't say.
Well,
But I know because my great grandfather had a soda fabric there, and I went there and I saw by the registration the name, the initials and the name of the grandfather he had the soda fabric. And after the war, whoever took it.
My brother worked for the soda factory. This has become popular.
I asked you about your life before the Germans came to you, and then can you tell us about how they came and what actually happened, the first part of your journey? Can you tell us about like everyday life at first?
Well, it's a good question, but the only thing I can tell you is you talk about a boy of 12 years.